Psychology is everywhere you look.
Which I think is cool because I love this field so much.
In diagnosing things, we're getting better at using the diagnosis in a functional way.
And one woman said to me recently, she goes, yeah, I never would have thought I'd have a male therapist based on everything I've gone through.
The evolution of our field from where it started, where we're diagnosing things that didn't make any sense at all, hysteria, whatever the diagnosis was for runaway slaves.
There's more appetite in the field to innovate, to want to look at things in a bit more of a holistic way.
What you're talking about, I think, is potentially merging the art and science.
But that being said,
hey, that's my marketing agenda. What are you talking about?
Craig Cure-All James.
I like it.
I don't think you go to school to be a therapist. I think you're born as one.
Behind the scenes, what are we as therapists talking about?
The idea isn't what you do, but why do you do it?
The why is almost always more interesting than the what.
That's the unsaid thing.
Oh, I'm saying it. I'm going there.
I'm excited for this one too, because we've talked about, in some other podcasts, some of the things that we're not liking as much about the field that are important to address, different trends. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to come back with this one with, some positive trends that we're seeing in the field, which I think is cool because I love this field so much, and that's why the negative things are so important, feel important for me and for us to talk about too, because we love it so much, because we think it's so valuable. What are y'all thoughts? You want to go ahead and jump into it, or I know we each kind of had a few things in mind?
Yeah, well, the most important thing for me when it comes to what we're doing here in this pod and what we do in the field is that we need to have that air of criticism so that we can refine the process. But let's not overlook the fact that the process, it's got some perks. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about the evolution of our field from where it started, where we're diagnosing things that didn't make any sense at all, hysteria, whatever the diagnosis was for runaway slaves, saying that people...
There was a diagnosis for that? I didn't even know that.
There was definitely a diagnosis for it. The thing about, saying that people who are trans had mental health issues, like our field has had some dark days and some archaic ways of thinking about things. Mm-hmm. But it's come so far. I mean, the diversity in who's putting out material, the diversity in who's seeing clients. I think that we're going in the right direction. I think the stigma around our field is kind of coming down. I think in general, there's a very positive feeling around psychology. Although Better Health has got its, or Better Help, I believe that's the name of it, has its controversies about it. The idea that there'd be commercials with people dancing in the park talking about getting a therapist, like, who saw that coming? Mm-hmm. I know I didn't. But I think the first trend that I wanted to highlight, I mentioned it when we were walking in, was I think that we're moving away from pathologizing normality or typical behavior. So we are not so quick to diagnose or label children for having things that kids have. Like kids have energy that's often misdirected, or like it doesn't have a place to go. So they might be a little bit more bouncy, be a little bit more energetic. And that doesn't mean they have ADHD. Maybe just maybe you got a kid who needs something to do, who's bored. I think that we're doing a better job of not labeling everything as depression. You had one bad day, you're not feeling great. You're sad, you're not depressed.
Was it a day or a moment?
Right, right. I think that we're doing a better job of that as a field. And I think that in diagnosing things, we're getting better at using the diagnosis in a functional way. Mm-hmm. So it's not this label that's just stuck on a person's forehead, put in a filing cabinet, and that's the way they are forever.
Can you explain what you mean by, for the people watching, by using the diagnosis in a functional way?
Most definitely. So I think in the past, the diagnosis was something that was a label. You stuck it on a person and they were that. So I am anxious, I am depressed, I am bipolar, I am whatever personality disorder. And as a result of me being this, there is pretty much no real hope for improvement or gains. We're just going to medicate this and we're going to mediate this. And this is just the way it's going to be. That as someone who's depressed, this is the way the life is going to be from this point forward.
Right.
And when you identify as your diagnosis, which is something you've actually brought up in previous pods, Matt, it's got its consequences because there's kind of a ceiling that you put on yourself that's pretty low. That because I am depressed or because I am anxious, there are these things that I can't participate in and I can't be a part of. And I've heard of some people questioning whether they should even become parents for fear of passing their diagnosis on to their children. Mm. And, we've got a clip series that we've been working on. And one of them actually is a scene from The Sopranos. And it comes up in that monologue between him and his therapist. So I think we're moving away from that. I think we're moving more towards, this is something I possess. So I have anxiety, I have depression, and I can also not have it. I can not have it in moments. I can not have it in the future. I can not have it right now. And that gives a ray of hope that things can improve and that this is something I overcome versus something that is become me.
Yeah. So you feel like as a field, we've talked about over-identifying with diagnoses some, and you're feeling like as a field, we are moving away from that in some ways, or it's less solidified, it's less over-pathologizing people, over-diagnosing in situations where
I think that's what we ultimately
experience.
want. I think that's what we ultimately want. We want these things to be tools and resources and not just this label that's stuck on a person. We want to help people understand their experience with the diagnosis. We want them to understand that experience can change, and therefore the diagnosis can change. We used to have 5 different axes. Now we don't have them anymore. But when we did, things like depression and anxiety were always on the axis 1 and believed to be things that could eventually come off a person's diagnosis history, that it was there at one point in time and now it's not there anymore.
Yeah. And it's and with the diagnoses, it's like even looking at what some of these diagnoses, like what do these things even mean?
Right.
Because it's like the criteria they're helpful, they're pointing to something for sure, but it's like, what are they really grounded in? Because it's like this checklist of symptoms, or the symptoms have to occur for this many days. So it's like, okay, on this day, I am somebody who worries a lot. And then on this day, it's been going on enough where now I have generalized anxiety disorder, And so because to have something where you diagnose it, you have to set some kind of criteria, you know? There has to be something there, because we don't have biological markers for these disorders. We can't do a scan and say, oh, this is depression.
Au contraire, my friend. That's another trend that's gotten better. We have gotten better and better at using data from brain scans to isolate and understand what areas of the brain are maybe not as well formed, or maybe showing consequences of mental health issues. The ones that light up, what areas light up when a person is struggling, which ones light up when a person is doing well. So I think that our field as a whole, like on various different levels, as far as, people in the room doing talk therapy, people doing things like scans, people doing things like evaluations, I think we are refining our tools to better be able to show people like this is what happens, or this is what can happen.
What you're talking about, I think, is potentially is merging the art and science, right? Because therapy as a whole is more of an art. It's not manualized. It's a gut feeling. It's something we're feeling it out. But I think back to the comments you were making too is the diagnosis. Does it matter? In some situations, it does. Some people say, "Hey, I've been dealing with X, Y, and Z. Help me understand it." Some go, well, what is it? And so how the client, the individual, frames the question determines how the diagnosis matters.
Yeah, no, I think, and it depends. It varies on the situation. I think some diagnoses are really important to have clarity on, and others I think can be helpful too, maybe, but can get in the way. And I guess I'm not as bullish on what is actually understood in terms of on the level of the brain, with the science of things like depression, other mental health disorders. I don't think they're well understood on the level of the brain yet. I don't think there's good models for it. I think there's, we might just have a different opinion of it, and but I know so I think there's some things that can be helpful with certain scans, but I don't know. Maybe I'm more skeptical of some of that.
I think we're looking. Sometimes I think what you're asking is, can we replicate it? Right? You see it once. Can other providers, other psychologists, doctors, MDs, replicate your findings? So then we can trust it.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's.
And I think what I'm seeing when I talk about the brain is I'm seeing how people are helping other people, whether it's their clients or, say they're working with kids, helping them understand the structure of the brain. That, we have the reptilian brain, we've got, the higher functioning part of the brain, and how the two interplay with one another. That if you get too emotionally aroused, your cognitive functioning is going to just immediately get shut off. And it's actually more of a survival thing than anything else. So again, not pathologizing normality. So if any one of us gets too aroused, then our cognitive functioning is going to decline. And therefore, what comes along with cognitive functioning? Planning, reflecting, being able to think things through, weigh things out. Like, you don't have that access to that if you are too worked up. And some of us are more sensitive to being worked up than others. And being able to, again, understand that like, you got to learn who you are. You may be somebody who retreats to logic and therefore you numb yourself to emotions. Or you may be somebody who, as soon as you feel anything, you turn that part of your brain off, or that part of your brain just isn't active anymore. So getting to know yourself and understand some things about your brain, not that you got to know every little part, like the amygdala is where all the fear is and all that good stuff, but just having an idea that, hey, I got to be mindful and monitor myself, that I may get to a point where I'm so worked up, I'm not going to be able to explain things in the perfect words, because I'm not going to have access to it.
I think we call that parenting.
Well, yeah.
No, I like what you're saying. I really agree with that. I think that can be really helpful insights for clients to have, to know a little bit more about what's happening on their level of the brain. And it allows us to step back from it, I think, a bit too.
Right.
Where, we get so lost in all of it, and then we say, like, okay, this is what's happening. And then it demystifies it some as well. And it's like, if we are in that high arousal state, or we get a kind of that fight or flight type of response, like, okay, there's nothing dangerous happening right now. It's a healthy response that's happening in my body. It's just happening in a time it's not really needed,
Right.
So it's like, okay, it feels more workable or something. I like that a lot. And to kind of mix and match a little bit here with some of the stuff I was thinking about talking about is, I think, like you were talking about with using scans, maybe diagnostically, or that what I do like about that idea, and something that I think is a positive trend that I see, is it seems like there's more appetite in the field, and then with people that are coming in to kind of think outside of the box that's been the box for a long time, to want to innovate, to want to look at things in a bit more of a holistic way. And the original thing that was making me think of this, when thinking about what I wanted to bring up with this topic for the podcast, was I was noticing that over time, a lot less often do people come in and they want to jump on a medication right away. And the medications, I think, can be helpful. They can serve they're a great tool to have in the toolbox potentially.
Right.
But people seem less likely to want to just jump right on a medication, and are more willing to look at things in a holistic way. So things like, even things like, diet, exercise. You mentioned like the gut microbiome in one of our last podcasts. There's like direct brain magnetic stimulation. There's, a lot of different things. And I think even rethinking and trying to be innovative is something I'm really interested in the field of therapy itself, too, of like, what are the assumptions that are built into some of these things that I might be doing, or that we're doing as a field. And and what could be more helpful with that. And another example of this, and I have mixed feelings. I know, Craig, you've expressed mixed feelings as well about this. Is the research into psychedelics for the treatment of mental health. Now, I think it's something that's been really overhyped, and you mean
it's become the cure-all? That this is going to be the magic wave that cures all mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, all the things are going to go away if you just spend a little time on a trip.
Yeah. So, but that being said,
hey, that's my marketing agenda. What are you talking about?
Craig Cure-all James.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. But again, my overall point being that I think it represents people having an appetite of like, okay, maybe we need to start looking at different things. We need to broaden our horizon. So, and like one kind of quote I found from this is from an article from the journal Nature. It's one of the top scientific journals. So it says, in contrast to most fields in medicine, progress to discover and develop new and improved psychiatric drugs has been slow and disappointing. the vast majority of currently prescribed drugs to treat schizophrenia, mood, and anxiety disorders are arguably no more effective than the first generation of psychiatric drugs that were introduced well over 50 years ago. And this is the part too where this last sentence that goes to the what I like about the psychedelic thing is that with only a few exceptions, the current psychiatric drugs work via the same fundamental mechanisms of action as the first generation agents. So this is specific with the medication, but pointing to something in the field in general of like doing the same thing over and over, of like keeping doubling down on how do I increase the level of serotonin in, you know, in the synapse or in the synaptic cleft between neurons or something, you know? And these kind of outdated ideas that it's like, oh, it's all about serotonin with depression or whatever. So this is all really long-winded way of saying that I like that it feels like there's more of a spirit of innovation and that clients themselves feel like, okay, I'm willing to try new things. How do I look at this in a different way?
I think you're talking about it. You're expanding the scope of how we explore everything, right? So it's you present with this in the session. Well, we need to consider, you know, how do we look at childhood experiences, right? The experiences you had to lead you here. You say you present with this problem. Well, we can look at medication, but we can look at diet and exercise, and we can try this, and we can. Again, I think it goes back to the art and science aspect, is that we're trying to figure it out. And it's a journey that while we would all like to have the answers, I think the process is what allows the alleviation of some of the discomfort.
Yeah.
Right? The acknowledgement that I don't have to own or hold on to the anxiety or depression. It's a place where I am in the moment. So I think it's a time thing. I think what I also consider is experiences, my own, the experiences my clients have, you know, all of that together can facilitate the change that we're hoping for people to have. So I think it's a good piece. I mean, we're all seeing different trends. Yeah.
Oh, and another one I wanted to add, this is one on there that, because it relates specifically to our practice too, is another example of this is like the harm reduction, alcohol moderation approach, which I know, you know, our other director, Cindy, has written several books on and trained on, and I know Craig, you're, and all of us, and but you all go and talk a lot about and train other clinicians on, and it's this kind of controversial thing a lot of times when people hear it of like, what, someone had some kind of issue with their drinking and now they don't need to go to AA, they don't, you know, or necessarily AA is a wonderful thing. I'm not against it.
It's a particular
but
model.
that there's that there's not other potential approaches, or it's like this not this all or nothing thing, and there's a spectrum of use and all of this, which you know is challenging a lot of assumptions, and not everyone. Some people bristle at, but another example of I think of what's like innovative and like, all right, let's look at things, do things different to help more people.
Well,
I want to throw that into.
What I take from it is this: there can be many schools of thought about how to get to a similar outcome. There are many different. I mean, what was it, 8 billion people on the planet? We're not going to have a one-size-fits-all approach to wellness. Wellness has been the platform that I've been standing on, screaming from, and all that other good stuff for years now. And one of the things I say to clients when I first start working with them is I can't prescribe wellness. So I don't have the formula for wellness ready-made that I can hand over to you and then you take it and run with it. It's something we've got to discover because you are you. So what wellness looks like for you is going to be unique unto you, just like your stressors are unique unto you. We could all be stressed by the same thing in different ways. You know, we all have bills. That could be stressful because maybe you grew up and bills was always late. And, you know, the stuff, you'd go turn the light on and you wonder if it's going to come on or not. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. So therefore, bills stress you out because you don't want them to be late. So you may find yourself compromising or trying to compensate for that by paying bills well in advance. Bills could stress you out because you really have these big, ambitious goals with money and they seem as a deterrent to you getting there. And therefore, whenever a bill shows up, although most of them are paperless now and digital, but like whenever that money comes out of your account, you're like, man, that sets me back another X amount of time before I can do this big thing. And so on and so forth. Like it could be the same stressor, but because of who you are, your unique self,
It's such an important point.
have your own experience of that stress. If that's the case with that part of it, it would have to be the case on the other side of it, that you will come up with these unique versions of remedies to deal with these unique experiences of stress. And I think there's an openness to that, which is part of the trend that you're bringing up that maybe didn't exist before. maybe there were different schools of thought around psychology. So you had your psychodynamic that's all about the different drives and anxieties along that. And you might have had your cognitive behavioral stuff, which only became cognitive behavioral stuff because our cognitive friends had to realize that you got to do stuff too. And then you got your emotionally focused stuff. So everybody had their little hat and their letters. But now I think that very much it's about seeing the person that shows up to your office and abandoning the letters and getting with the person.
Well, that's what we as psychiatrists, wow.
What, you been
Heck no. Social workers, that's how we're trained. Person in their environment. We don't, our foundation is the diagnosis is there, but a lot of it is, let me get to understand you. That's really the foundation of our training. It's interesting we keep talking about diagnosis. The only people who really it matters to are insurance companies for reimbursement.
In many cases.
Often, yeah.
But, the person in the environment. I mean, that's the thing for me. I think the trend that I'm seeing, mine are kind of twofold. One, a lot more psychiatric nurse practitioners. Not that the medical doctors are bad, but each has a very different bedside manner. And I really we've had an occasion here in the years past to have two really, really good, right? And so I really like working with psychiatric nurse practitioners. Just they see it differently, give you a different observation. The ones that I've worked with are very collaborative. And I think the other piece that I'm paying attention to is the venues or the arenas in which we work.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one.
Social work used to be DFS work, as Department of Family Services, person coming and taking the kid away. Well, we're in different, we've expanded what we do as therapists, right? So we can still work for our local county government. We can do nonprofit work. We can do for-profit work, sports psychology. So we are valued in so many different areas in society, right? So we're not just here. We branch. We've been able to branch out and be in a lot of different areas. So those are two things that I really have been watching and really like to see.
Most definitely. I mean, that concept of being in all the different spaces we are, I tell folks all the time, psychology is everywhere you look. It's everywhere you look. It's everywhere you go. And when you start to look for it and you see it, you realize it has always been around you. It's in your family system. It's in the schools.
Your phone.
It's at your workplace. I mean, HR. How many times are HR being called in to be therapists to some of the things that are going on different jobs? And
Your barber.
the barber. Oh my goodness, legit.
Your bartender.
I recently had somebody call
incredible
in.
therapist, most of them, yeah.
I recently had somebody call in search of therapy, and they mentioned that they worked at a hair salon or whatever, and that they acted like, I'm not doing your job, but I kind of do a small version of your job.
I've had some barber clients too, yes.
Yeah, and I mentioned to the person that I've got a friend, a guy named Corey Burton, who's doing good work up in Pennsylvania. What up, Corey? He had a concept that he's still working at where he started off being a barber. Like he had a plan, he was in school for psychology. He was doing this thing with that, but he had ultimately planned, and he is planning to merge his practices where there's some element of the fact that he's going to be a barber in his own way, but he's also going to be able to provide that service, or at least use a facilitator. And like that kind of creative thinking is something that we have been maybe not always looking for in our field.
Because we've been told this is how we're supposed to work and
sit on a couch.
We've been told this is what you're supposed to do when somebody's struggling. And so when you bring more people to the profession, different experiences, the opportunities, the avenues open up for more, right? The harm reduction piece. That was just simplicity, sitting and thinking, this approach doesn't work, right? There's got to be something else. So I think it's more eyes, more opportunities allow for different points of view. That barber therapist piece, oh, wow.
He was breaking it down for me. I'm like, all right, Corey, I see your vision. And it was easy to see. And I've had my own thoughts. Like, I love it here at Insight. This has been one of the best places I've ever worked. I've been very fortunate. I've been in my career. Like, some people have like extensive history working in fast food or doing some kind of service job. Like, I didn't have that. I've worked at a billiards room at my college as a work study student. I worked as a research assistant as a work study student. I worked in a records clerk position at my grad school, printing out transcripts and stuff like that. But the actual work that I've done, I worked a summer job as a male mentor right before I went to college. I worked 2 summers as a camp counselor for sports camps coming to the University of Michigan. These were very similar roles to what I do now. Mm-hmm. And this, as you said, Matt, at the beginning of this, I love this field. I absolutely love the work that I do. The thing about it, though, is it's got to be going somewhere. It's got to be a trend upward. We've got to be helping folks. And the more we can do it in these different ways and bring things together that are natural helps. Like, I had this idea, hey, let's get everything under one roof. We got the mental health. What if we can get the physical fitness under one roof? What if we can get the body therapies under one roof? Mind, body, soul. Let's get it all together. Started talking about it about 4 or 5 years ago. Everybody I talked to, I love that. Met a woman who was doing craniosacral therapy. I'd never done it before. I started talking to a woman who was an acupuncturist. Like, we are all working to heal and help and get people to be well, but oftentimes we're doing it in our own little space. I mean, we had a guy come into our practice and talk a little bit, and he was talking about what he was doing. I'm not sure if we're going to get the chance to work with him directly, but like even he was talking about the idea of we need to connect because we're attacking these areas of wellness, but maybe we could collaborate. Mind, body, spirit. We're not trying to separate them anymore.
That all really resonates with me. And that's a lot the type of stuff I've been thinking about recently of like, why does it need to be 50 minutes, these therapy sessions? You know, would it be more effective with some of my clients to do, you know, let's say they're coming in 50 minutes a week or something. I think for some clients, I could imagine it would be more effective to do 2 hours every other week and then create some structure in between for them to do. Or like, I don't know. I mean, that's not a very deep example, but a kind of example. Or I've done some of this, but like going out in the community and some of the constraints come from just like the logistical constraints of doing things that it's hard to work around at times. But like, you know, with where we are, I've, you know, gone to the shopping centers around here and done like exposure therapy with people with like social anxieties and things. I've done some of that, but like things like that where it's like, I don't know, just trying to be a bit more creative and taking on that more in the spirit of being like a healer.
But I think that's the piece is we get to figure out what works. Some of it's anecdotal, right? What you do today with this client or tomorrow may not be as effective with the next, but they look really similar. So I like the ability to approach an individual based on what I know, what they know, and how do we work collaboratively, right? And it doesn't have to be a 50-minute session, right? I've seen situations where it's 2 30-minute sessions in a week because the touch points are important. And so I always encourage folks, what do you see? What are you thinking? Propose to your client, see what happens. Take a shot.
Hey,
that's really what it's about.
Meeting the person that comes into your office and figuring out kind of what's the format. Something I've added to my evaluations lately, and I'm glad that I started to think to ask this is, how do you receive help best? Just asking that simple question. It's something I've been doing this almost 14 years come this fall. Will be 14 years, which is kind of crazy. But for whatever reason, I didn't think to ask it before, but I've started to ask it, and you will be surprised at some of the responses that you get, and it just makes me better able to meet that person who I'm sitting with and help them. That, okay, well, you like direct comments, you like illustrations, you like metaphors, you like analogies. I can do all of that.
I like that, man. That's cool.
But that's actually, if you look at the assessment when people first start out here, it's like 4 pages, right? I always say to folks, if you find a question or a way to approach a client, share it, because you don't really know like that. I never thought about that.
I've never thought about it before.
It was great.
2 months ago, I started doing that.
Yeah. Like when I would work a lot of teenagers, I would ask a question, what's your child's responsibilities at the home?
Ooh, I like that one.
Chores. I can ask you chores, but let me frame the question, see what else I get.
Right.
I remember, and I don't know how this came about, I remember asking teenagers, algebra and geometry, which makes sense and which is easiest, because they're very different in how you do them.
Oh, yeah.
And it helped me to understand how that individual was processing information. So I think we get to be creative, right? That's what we're talking about. The positive trends is how can I be very creative, not diagnostically, but in terms of this individual with all the other experiences I've had.
Yeah. So, and so we were talking too about like, okay, let's make it personal to ourselves and our own practice of like, what's a positive experience that we've had recently, or it doesn't have to be recently, I guess, but at some point with the client. And the one that came to mind for me was, so, and just with that, like with one meeting with this person. Now I'd known them a little bit in the past, like working with their family some, so it wasn't a complete like first meeting type of thing. So there's already rapport there. Is my point. But this person, I don't want to give too many of the details, but had lost a child in their life a long time ago, and then is figuring out things and how to relate to their their adolescent or young adult actually child now, and carrying an extraordinary amount of guilt around, where it's my fault, and logically, of course, all of us would see it had nothing to do. It wasn't their fault at all. But just through the one session, like really, really focusing and digging in on this thing, and we're using some of these cognitive therapy techniques and also some other things. But even just through like the one session, that weight that they had carried being, significantly reduced, feeling like lighter for the first time, and, that they can remember, maybe reduced 70% or something, this kind of weight that they carry with this and this kind of thing. And, so things like that and that's not the experience every time, every session, every single person. But
wait, you mean you don't have a magic wand?
I don't. No.
Magic Don Juan.
Magic Don Juan. It's another good. That was Craig's nickname in high school. Magic Don Juan. High school and college. But yeah, it was things like that are really powerful and moving. That's like,
That sounds like
really
a beautiful
special
moment, man.
Yeah, it was, because I really, really like this person. It's someone like really root for. So it was cool. Yeah. What about you all?
Well, I've had a lot of experience doing groups. I've done all kinds of substance related groups over the course of my career, but I've been very fortunate here at the practice to recently jump back into the pool of facilitating groups, and it's been great. It's been an absolute joy and a treat. And in a recent group that I was able to facilitate, I got a group of people to draw houses.
Houses?
Yes,
Yeah,
they drew houses. And I gave them no real context for this request, but they did that. You saw all kinds of little pictures of houses. It was pretty fun. And then I asked them to associate the different elements of the house that they had drawn with different things that we needed to talk about in terms of sleep, food, drinking, whether it was alcoholic beverages or non-alcoholic beverages, but also being married. And being married, being associated with socializing. And to listen to the different responses that were offered about where they would put these different elements. And I gave them a freebie. I said, hey, look, I'm letting you know right now, I think sleep is the foundation of success. That independent of having sleep on a regular basis, it's hard for anybody to be well. But, I gave them that, so sleep went underneath the house. It was the foundation. But from there, I didn't try to give any guidance because I don't think there was a right answer from there on. Like, where you put food in your life and how it benefits you and how it helps you be well, or maybe not. Maybe you eat problematic things and it actually ends up being an impediment to your life, whatever. But to hear the thought processes of the different people who were in the group and how they went with it, they ran with it. And by the end of the group, to be able to say, like, I had never thought about it like that. As a group facilitator, that's what you dream of. You dream of having a room of people come together with no real idea about where that thing that you may put out there is going to go, and to have them walk away and say, I thought differently because we did this activity. That's why we do it.
Cool. What about you, Craig?
I think the thing that stands out for me, it started probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer. I don't know how it happened, but I have found, I don't know if joy is the right word or excitement. I don't know what the adjective is.
got a lot of women that I work with, married moms, right? Career oriented or not, parents, husbands, and wives. I found it, they will show up to see a male therapist. And I remember asking one lady, hey, how'd you find out about me? And she says, I posted it on the Real Housewives of Loudoun County. A lady said a few
Shout
ladies.
out.
Yeah, shout out. And a few ladies messaged her independently and said, come see Craig. And I was like, cool. Didn't even know that was out there, first off. But I think it's amazing what you get to see. Some people will call us and go, I want to see this type of therapist. Well, you never know, right? So the fact that I get to work with a lot of women, just to kind of process, helping them understand their husbands better, dealing with some of the issues related to having kids and functioning and not functioning and all of this stuff. It's actually really excitement. It actually helped me appreciate what we do even more, because I thought this is what I want to do. And the clients help shape me to be something different and see things differently. So I think for me, it's just the ability to work with the moms, the 30, 40,
That's cool.
50 somethings. It's fascinating, right? And one woman said to me recently, she goes, yeah, I never would have thought I'd have a male therapist based on everything I've gone through. I was like, well, me either. And we started laughing about it. But that's the thing that I probably like right now, is the fact that I get to work with all those moms.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is definitely cool, man.
Yeah, I'm feel inspired right now. Yeah.
Hey, man,
It's an awesome field. It's an awesome field, because I was going through and looking at some of the edits and stuff of other ones. I was like, oh, I sound kind of negative, like I'm about some of these things, pointing out all this stuff I don't like. But it's a real joy, this type of work.
You know what it is, Matt? I think you said it earlier, we all love this profession, so we're trying to protect it.
Right.
Right? Dr. Janice Berry Edwards, she was one of my professors in grad school. And she said, protect your profession. And I didn't know what she meant at the time. I don't think you're being negative. I think you're saying, look, these are some concerns I have. I love my profession.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to growing it, but some of y'all are not trying to grow it in the best and most healthiest way.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't think you're negative.
Oh, no, I think that it's essential when you do love someone or something that you're able to see it in a balanced way, where you recognize the amazing and great things about it, but you also are able to be honest about some things that may be terrible and need to change. If we can't do that, then we can't really get to wherever we're trying to go. And it kind of led me to, I know we typically wrap up with an insightful thought, and mine today is, there are some trends that I'm down on, but the field as a whole is trending up. I think that psychology is everywhere, and I think that it can be a benefit to everyone. I don't think it has to be seen as this space that is exclusively for something being wrong and it getting fixed. I'm not a mechanic or a dentist. I do not pretend to be one after I stay at a hotel for a night. So
I knew that was coming.
I just don't see myself as some kind of knower or some kind of Mr. Fix-It. Like, that's just not the role that I play in the lives of the people that I work with and the people that I get exposed to. Instead, I see myself as someone who is seeking knowledge as well and attempting to better myself and grow and helping others in their journey as they grow. It's part of that development process. I think that one of the quickest ways for people to really learn something is by sharing it with others and seeing how well they can explain it and seeing where there may be gaps. And I think that with the previous pod that we did about things that we were not feeling in the field, we're saying these are gaps. And in this pod, I hope that whomever might give it a look and listen sees it as, we're also saying the gaps aren't what they used to be. That they're getting closed, and they're getting closed in ways that they needed to get closed in order for the field to improve and advance and for clients to have a better experience in general. So, yeah, that's my insightful thought.